In this tutorial, we'll go through the Overlays pack and have a look at what's included and how we can combine these overlays to create something special. We'll start with an example where I'll go over the basics of importing and customizing, and end with one that's a bit more challenging but still easy to grasp. For this one, we'll be working in both After Effects and Premiere Pro simultaneously, as the process of adding and customizing these overlays is the same across both. All of these overlays are really easy to use. You can just import them on top of your footage and you're good to go. So, feel free to play around with everything that's here and test out different overlays on your own. But before you do that, let's run through the process of importing and customizing one of these overlays together. We'll start with the holy grail of overlays, light leaks. I have this beautiful footage over here that would really benefit from a smooth and cool looking light leak. So, let's add one. In the Animation Composer, look for Graphic Components, open up the Overlays folder, and then Light Leaks. There's a lot of these to choose from, so give me a sec to find a good light leak. Okay, I think this one matches the footage quite nicely, so let's try this one. Perfect. This light leak fits nicely, so I don't have to make any changes to it. If you choose one that doesn't fit your footage, you can change how it looks in the Edit tab. For example, we can quickly flip the light leak either horizontally or vertically. We can also change the color by adjusting the hue. Increase or decrease the saturation, or we could just tint the entire light leak with a color we want. Additionally, we can add a bit of blur. I'll reset everything since I liked how it looked originally, but at least now we know how we would go about customizing these light leaks if we needed to. Now, let's move to Premiere and quickly go through the process there as well. In Premiere, the setup is identical, so I'll use the same footage again, so it's not confusing. And since I know which light leak works best for this one, I'll import the same light leak as before. I'll again go to Overlays, Light Leaks, and find the light leak from before, which I think had the number 22? Yeah, this is the one. I'll import it, and let's preview it. Looks right. One thing that's different is that there are no controls for this or any of the other light leaks in Premiere, so don't worry if you can't find the controls. With that said, the imported light leak already has its blending mode set to screen and is ready to be used. Perfect. Now, let's move on to something a bit more difficult, but slightly more interesting. We'll continue in Premiere and create this example right here, using the 8mm film and film burn overlays. It might seem daunting at first, but it's really just 4 overlays combined together. So let's get started by importing the first overlay. Again, go to Overlays, now Film, and choose one of the overlays here. I can either choose an 8mm film with no borders, which is all of the ones at the top here, or I can choose one of these 3 at the bottom that have visible borders when imported. I think I'm going to go with the latter, since I like the idea of having authentic film borders on the side of my footage here. So let's pick this one and see if it fits. Okay, that looks good. First things first, let's change the duration to match my footage underneath. If we wanted to, we could also flip the film around, or change the color, similar to how we made changes to the light leak in After Effects. But I'll keep it as is for now, since I like how it looks. Looking great so far. Next, let's move this film overlay one layer above since I want to add an additional grain overlay under it. Let me look for one real quick. I think this one should work. So let's add it in and see. Let me just fix the duration real quick. Okay, and let's preview. Now we'll want to add a film burn and turn it into a transition so that the example loops nicely. Open up the Film Burns folder, and let's find one. Personally, I like these ones with the letters, so let's pick one of them. Okay, now that it's in my timeline, we'll have to turn this overlay into a transition. So, first off, ungroup the imported film burn. Now, find a good spot for a cut. Preferably, you'd want to find a spot where this film burn covers the screen as much as possible. I'll cut all 3 layers at this spot I found, align the first part to the end of the footage, and move the second part to the beginning. And preview this. Now, to sell the 8mm look even more, I'll add in a separate overlay that will work well with our other overlays called Film Look. It should be somewhere in the effects category here. Yeah, here we go. I'll add in the light version since I don't want this effect to overpower the other overlays. I'll just realign it to the start of my sequence, and I'll also trim the layers so that it matches my footage. One last thing I could do is change the footage's frame rate to make it slightly more realistic. I'll select my footage and look for a posterized time effect. I'll add it to my footage. And in the effects controls, I'll change the frame rate to 15. Now let's see if it looks good. Exactly the look I was going for, and it all loops perfectly too. Now on to the final example. We'll be combining a couple of different overlays to get a result that looks roughly like this, emulating an old, damaged VHS tape that degrades our original footage to give us that sweet 90s VHS look. I've already got footage in my composition, so let's start adding the overlays one by one. First one on the list is VHS. Go to Overlays, VHS, and Betacam. And at the very bottom, you'll see the VHS overlay. You can import it either with or without the on-screen text, such as the timecode, play state, and so on. I want to have these texts in this example, so I'll go with the text version. And let's see how it looks. Now, there's a lot of controls here, as this overlay is pretty modular. We'll only go through some of these controls, but feel free to pause and explore all the customization options before continuing. I'll start by changing the duration to fit my composition. And let's adjust some of the main controls in the overlay group here. We can, for example, increase the artifacting, increase the noise, decrease the sharpness, or make the colors under the overlay look more washed. But I'll keep it as it was for now and reset everything. Now, let's check out the customization options for text. I'll change the date text first, and then the time text. If I wanted to, I could also change the play state that's visible in the top left to either pause, rewind, or fast forward. For rewind, this would make the timecode count down instead of up based on the duration we set at the start. But I'll go back to the original play state since I want the timecode to function normally. Great, on to the next overlay. I want to add a bit of distortion to this, so let's go to VHS and Betacam again and look for a nice looking glitch. I like how this one looks, but it feels a bit too intense, so let's maybe try the one next to it since it looks a bit smoother. Yeah, it looks fine and it's not too invasive. But let's just try to increase the distortion values by, like, double the original value, and see what happens. I'll change the horizontal first, and then the vertical. I'll preview it real quick. Yeah, okay, never mind. That's too much. So let's quickly go back to the original values. The only thing I'll change then is the opacity, so I'll lower it a bit here. Good. Now on to the next one. We'll be adding a CRT overlay now. This one's in the effects folder. So open up the folder and it should be on the top here. First off, I'll cut down the CRT size to around half so that the texture isn't as overpowering. And since I don't want the screen to be bending at all for this example, I'll turn off the screen bend altogether. While at it, I'll also change scale correction to a low value, since it still looks a bit too zoomed in my opinion. Great. I can also control the amount of distortion this overlay adds by adjusting the screen wobble height. I'll change it to a really high value so that we can see what exactly it does. I'll reset it and keep it on the original value. Lastly, I'll turn off the flicker, since I'll be adding a new flicker as a separate overlay. And, I'm just now realizing I forgot to turn it off on the VHS overlay I added first. So I'll go back to the VHS layer and turn off the flicker here as well. And let's add the separate flicker overlay. Again, go to the effects folder and find the flicker overlay. It should be somewhere at the bottom. Yeah, here you go. Add it and move it under all the other overlays in the timeline. If you're working with multiple overlays like I am, it's easier and faster to add flicker this way, since you can make changes all at once instead of adjusting each overlay individually. I might be a bit nitpicky, but I feel like the footage is a bit too dark for me, so I'll quickly add an additional light to the scene. There's a handful of light overlays here, but I'll go with the top light since that one is pretty much ready to go as soon as I import it. I'll just need to move it under all the other overlays. And let's also decrease the opacity so it's not as bright. Awesome. Last thing I want to add is a bit of blur around our person here. And since they're in the middle of my footage, a radial blur would work great. So I'll go to Effects again, scroll to the very bottom, and find this blur. And I'll add it. Only thing I'll want to change is the scale offset by setting it to 0, just so the blur is as close to our person here as possible. Perfect, and that's a wrap. We went through a handful of overlays together, but this only scratches the surface of everything that's included. So feel free to play around with the different overlays, experiment with your own footage, and get creative with how you approach using these overlays in your workflow. Get this at MrHorse.com.